Hello, friends. It's wonderful to be here with such a large group of artists this morning. Thank you all so much for making the world a better place, especially in the last couple of years. As Carmen mentioned, my name is Michael Bobbitt. I am the Executive Director of Mass Cultural Council. Mass Cultural Council is your state agency working to support and promote the power of culture across Massachusetts. You're here this morning to learn about cultural sector recovery grants for individuals. We are so grateful for the state's investment in federal ARPA and state surplus dollars, and we have a historic level of public funding to distribute. Please take a moment to send your state legislators a note of thanks. If you don't know who they are, we'll add a link to the chat. Get them on your VIP lists and build relationships with them. This will go a long way in continuing to receive their support of the cultural sector. When we received our allocation earlier this year, our first step was to ask you what you needed. And you told us loud and clear, unrestricted aid to support your ongoing recovery. We have developed a program that provides just that. As we continue to move through and beyond the pandemic, your work is more important than ever. These grants are meant not only to support you as you continue to recover and rebuild, but to help you look forward and chart a path of growth. Our incredible team, who is so committed to you, has created a simple application. We've already received feedback from some applicants that it takes under 30 minutes to complete. The pandemic was hard enough. Applying for grants should be easy, right? I want to assure you that no grant writing experience is necessary, and our team is here to support you, especially if you've never applied for or received a Mass Cultural Council grant before. We want to hear from you, and we are excited to see what you do with this funding. Please help us out by sharing this information with other artists and creatives, especially those from communities that have been historically marginalized, BIPOC, Native American, deaf, disabled, rural, and other communities. Their success grows the whole sector. Additionally, please share it with culture bearers, drag artists, DJs, street artists and performers, people who consider themselves non-artistic workers like crew and house managers, interpreters, scientists, humanists, people that tend to not get grant money. And before I go, I want to thank our American Sign Language interpreters, Lisa, Tara, and our captioner, Jill, who are with us this morning. With that, I'll turn it back over to the team to walk you through all you'll need to know about the program, and I wish you the best as you move through your application process. Thank you again for being with us this morning, and thank you for all that you do.
Hello, my name is Dan Blask. My pronouns are he, him, and I have the honor of working as program manager for grants and services for artists and individuals in the cultural sector at Mass Cultural Council. You heard earlier from Carmen, my colleague, Communications and Community Engagement Manager at Mass Cultural Council, and from our Executive Director, Michael J. Bobbitt at Mass Cultural Council. We are supported today by Cheyenne Cohn-Postel and Maggie Holtzberg, as well as Kelly Bennett, who is not pictured. They will be moderating the Q&A, and I'll speak in just a minute about how we are handling questions that we receive from you as we proceed through this information session. So we know there'll be a great deal of questions about our cultural sector recovery grants for individuals, and we welcome them. It may work best if you hold your question until we get to that portion of the presentation. We will pause. We will take a moment to see what questions are occurring in the Q&A. Some may be answered directly by our staff through the Q&A function, and some we may respond to live so that everyone can hear our responses. We will also publish a recorded version of this webinar on our YouTube channel Mass Cultural Council, at our YouTube channel, Mass Cultural Council YouTube channel. That will also include closed captioning, and it will be ever present. So today's agenda, we are going to discuss the cultural sector recovery grants for individuals. And what I'd like to say is that if you take one thing from this information session, it is that as Michael, our director, said, we are your state agency. We welcome the opportunity to support you. And if you are eligible for the grant that we are discussing today, we hope you will strongly consider applying, and we will do everything we can to make that a good process for you. If it turns out during the course of this info session, you learn that you are not eligible to apply for this particular grant, we value your work. We hope we can support you in future programs. But we will go over the cultural sector recovery grants for individuals, talk about eligibility to the program, talk about the what the application itself will contain, the timeline for the process, and then of course we will take any questions. The cultural sector recovery grants for individuals is the largest investment in individual artists in the Commonwealth's history. They are unrestricted grants of $5,000 to creatives and gig workers to support recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and help set a path for growth. This image, you see two artists performing. These are artists that have been funded by Mass Cultural Council grants in the past. On the left is Nassim Alatrash, and on the right, Irini Tornisaki. And the photo is by Dror Pekilny. I want to mention that many of the images you'll see during this presentation are by artists that Mass Cultural Council has had the honor to support and fund. The image that you saw when the info session first began was a work of photography art by Marky Kaufman. You are eligible to apply for this grant if you are an artist or culture bearer or cultural practitioner active in any artistic discipline or cultural tradition. That includes, but is not limited to, musicians, performers, creative writers of all kinds, theater artists, DJs, street performers, drag artists, visual artists of all kinds, including muralists, crafts artists, community-based artists, and more. If you have any questions about whether this includes you, you can put them in the Q&A, or please feel free to follow up with us separately, and we will help you to decide that. But we wanted it to be a broad eligibility so that artists and creatives of all kinds feel welcome to apply.
Dan,
yes.
Dan, this is Cheyenne.
Please.
I just want to call out that Jill, our live captioner, is here. If you can make that switch from auto captions to live.
Thank you. Jill, do you know how you are named in the attendee list? Or could you raise your hand?
Jill is one of the panelists now.
Oh, pardon me. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, and it'll just take a few seconds to integrate.
Of course.
You can probably leave the auto captions on, and then when I start, mine will just override those.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
While we are waiting, I'll mention that this image is a detail of where the sky touches the earth Donde el cielo tocó la tierra by Daniela Rivera. So you are eligible to apply if you are an artist or cultural practitioner active in any artistic discipline or cultural tradition. You are also eligible to apply if you are a teaching artist or teaching interpretive scientist or humanist. Now, often this would include those individuals who are supported by our STARS residency program, including artists, interpretive scientists, and humanists who do K through 12 residencies, or residencies in K through 12 schools. But it also includes private teachers of private music lessons or private art lessons. Again, if you have any question about whether you would be included in this group, please let us know. You are eligible to apply also if you are a cultural worker in the arts, humanities, and sciences. This would include independent individuals who are directly involved in arts and culture, but who may not identify as an artist. This could include a freelance curator, theater lighting technician, art conservationist. Again, if you have any questions, please let us know. I wonder, Mass Cultural Council staff, are there eligibility questions related to these three categories that have come up in the Q&A?
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. And there's a question whether consultants and administrative staff support are allowed to apply.
Thank you. This is Dan. That's a great question. The key is whether there's a direct connection to arts and culture. So assuming yes, the other key question would be whether that work is independent. So someone who, this funding is meant to support independent individuals. So if someone's work in arts and culture, and actually I'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, but if someone's work in arts and culture is through their full-time position for a cultural agency, you would not be eligible. But if it's work that is independent of work for someone, for another organization, then you would be eligible. So that work could be eligible for this grant, but it depends on whether it's independent or whether it's as an employee of an organization.
Hey,
Dan,
Dan, this is Cheyenne. Oh, I'm sorry, Kelly, were you still going?
just one more.
Great.
Are cultural gig workers who may say secure part-time employment teaching in their field through a university eligible for the grant?
That is, thank you. This is Dan again. That's a great question. The answer is yes. If you do independent work in arts and culture, you are eligible to apply. Whether or not you have a part-time or even full-time position somewhere else, that really is not the question. It's whether you do that independent work in arts and culture. And so, yes, the answer would be yes, you would be eligible.
Hi, Dan, this is Cheyenne. And I don't believe that we've taken a second to talk about how there's two programs in our COVID recovery portfolio. So I'll just read the question out specifically, and hopefully you can let people know the difference between applying as an individual or an organization. As a small press comics publisher, would it be best if I worked with individual Massachusetts-based artists to secure grants as part of the publication of their work? And I think this question is really, is it better for individual artists to apply themselves or for the organization that employs the artists to apply, or are they both eligible for each program?
Hi, thanks so much, Cheyenne. First of all, yes, there are two programs. There's the Cultural Sector Recovery Grant for organizations, and then today we're talking about the Cultural Sector Recovery Grants for individuals, and they are separate programs, and applicants would need to decide which to apply for. To answer that great question. I would say the artists that Small Press works with should absolutely look into applying for the cultural sector recovery grants for individuals. The grants are unrestricted. If those folks are funded, they would be able to use those funds to support themselves in their careers. They would not necessarily need to use them to fund future publications, though of course they could. The small press, I would encourage the leader of the small press to look into the cultural sector recovery grants for organizations, pardon me, and see whether your organization might be eligible to apply for that. If you are not eligible to apply as an organization, I hope you too will consider applying for the cultural sector recovery grants for individuals.
Thank you so much.
This is Charles, just asking Dan if you could turn off the automatic captions, and then Jill's captions will show up.
Okay. So
That's
thank you,
good.
Charles. This is
Thank
Dan.
you.
I have turned off the automatic captions. Thank you. Okay. At this point, I think I will continue to talk about program eligibility. So again, you are eligible to apply if you are in one of these three categories, and you need to meet these 5 criteria. To be eligible for this program, you need to be 18 years of age or older. You need to be a full year resident of Massachusetts. Now, by full year, we are using the Massachusetts tax code's definition of full year resident. Essentially, it means that you maintain a residence in Massachusetts for the full year and you spend at least 183 days residing there. We do not have a limit as to when you move to Massachusetts. So new residents to Massachusetts, as long as they are currently full year residents of Massachusetts, they are eligible to apply. So you also need to work independently in the arts and culture sector, as I talked about a little bit earlier. You are not a full-time student. Part-time students would be eligible to apply, but unfortunately, full-time students at an undergraduate or in a graduate program would not be eligible to apply. And you cannot be a Mass Cultural Council staff member or a council member or family of staff and council. The grants in this program are $5,000 and they are unrestricted. By unrestricted, we mean that grantees decide how best to use the support. We hope these grants will help you set a path for growth in your work in the cultural sector. There will be a simple survey that we will ask you to take at the end of the fiscal year, so in June. But again, the funding is up to the grantees to decide how best to use it. This image is by Zhongi Elena Lee. It's a cut paper tiger. How will the grants be decided? This program has funding priorities that I will talk about in just a moment. We will also make sure that grants are distributed throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And if there are more grant applications than we have funds to award, there will be a lottery-style randomized selection to decide who among eligible applicants receives grants. So this image is called Angel Landing, and it's by Imo Ime. I mentioned that the program has funding priorities. Now, this is this is distinct from eligibility. There's the question of whether people are eligible to apply, but then funding priorities is different. If you don't meet the funding priorities, that does not mean you're not eligible to apply. Or if you meet some funding priorities, but not others. Again, it doesn't mean that you are not eligible to apply. We hope that everyone who is eligible to apply will strongly consider doing so. We are noting that the program does have some funding priorities. So even though we are working to distribute the grants geographically fairly, and that there will be a randomized lottery style distribution of grants, we will have some funding priorities among those two areas. And those priorities are, we will give priority to new grantees. So that means individuals who have not received direct grants from Mass Cultural Council within the last 6 years. Usually direct grants means a grant from the Artist Fellowships Program, a grant from the Traditional Arts Apprenticeship Program, or a grant from the COVID-19 Relief Fund. Of note, our local cultural council grants are not considered direct grants. So if you've received recent grants from an LCC, that would not count against your being counted as a new grantee. Another funding priority are historically underfunded applicants. Now, individuals that we include in this category are people of the global majority. That includes Black, Indigenous, people of color, Latinx, Asian, Native American, Pacific Islander, and all other ethnicities of color. We're also including in historically underfunded applicants people who identify as deaf or people who identify as having a disability. And lastly, among our funding priorities, people who live in under-resourced cities and towns. So those are cities and towns that are below the state's median household income and below the statewide educational attainment level. We have a full list of those cities and towns on our website. This image is a detail of Crazy Eights by Laura Petrovich Cheney. And I thought I might pause here and ask staff if there are questions that that are occurring in the Q&A.
Yes, this is Maggie speaking. And someone's writing and asking, saying, hello, I'm a full-time grad student, as that's the requirement for an international student. I'm also a part-time teaching artist at Boston Public Schools. May I ask, why does full-time student not be eligible for applying? Well, she's asking why, but you are not eligible to apply. But I'm not sure how to respond to that, Dan.
Sure. This is Dan again. I really appreciate that question. I really appreciate your work in the arts. These are difficult calls to make. They always are. These eligibility questions. As a state agency, we, even though we feel so fortunate to have this funding to support the cultural sector, we still need to make difficult decisions about where best to shepherd those funds. And as I said, it's not an easy call. It does not mean that we don't value or find your work worthy. And I truly mean this when I say I hope that we can support you in the future. But we felt that we could make a bigger impact by focusing the funds away from full-time students.
Dan, this is Kelly. Are artists who have contracts as full-time college teaching positions eligible for the grant?
Hi, this is Dan. Thank you, Kelly. The key in that question is artists. So whether or not you are a full-time teacher is not really the relevant question. It's whether you work as an artist. It sounds like you do. Your question is, are artists? So yes, the answer is yes. Your work as an artist is what you'd be applying for support for. And again, the full-time employment, certainly that's a common circumstance. Many artists and people in creative fields need to wear multiple hats, and we understand that. Having full-time employment does not mean that you're ineligible to apply since you are an artist.
This is Maggie. One quick question. Interesting. Somebody's asking if they should use the town where their studio is or the town where they live when they apply.
Thank you. This is Dan. That's a great question. It would be the town where the individual lives.
Yeah.
And of note, I'll add that we do require that people use their actual home address, not only their mailing address in their application. There needs to be an actual home address.
Dan, this is Kelly. If someone is a musician, should their band apply to the organization's recovery grant, or should they each apply individually for the individual recovery grant?
Hi, this is Dan. That's a great question. In a sense, it depends how the band is structured. If it's structured as a business with multiple members, it's possible that you would meet the eligibility requirements of the organization's funding, and you may want to look into that. But I can say that the artists in the band, assuming they each meet our eligibility requirements, would be definitely eligible to apply for the individuals funding each of them. And their being in the same band would not be a barrier to that. I think I will continue. I mentioned that the grants will be distributed geographically. So we will award the grants by region of the Commonwealth to 6 different regions in proportion to the number of applications we receive from each of those regions. Those regions include Greater Boston, Central, Metro West, Northeast, Southeast, and Western. And this image is a detail of Anatide's Repose by Joyce Utting Schutter. Our application is online. All who apply for this program will apply using our grants management system. A few things to note about our grants management system. We have worked as hard as we can to make the application process a simple one. We have heard from some feedback from applicants that it's been a fairly simple process and fairly painless. We're glad for that. But we are also very happy to help if any issues, if applicants face any issues, either creating a user profile in our system or finding the grant in our system. Any other issue that occurs, we're happy to help. A few things to keep in mind is that if you have applied for Mass Cultural Council funding in the past, you likely are already in our system. So in that case, click Forgot Password on this front page and give us your email, and you'll be able to reset your password if you need to. If you have applied within the last year or so, you can just log in with your username and password and click on Current Opportunities. If you have not applied to us in the past, just register in our system, and we look forward to supporting you now and in the future. When you apply or when you register in our system, please check your user profile and make sure that the information in it is up to date. Specifically, our funding priority for under-resourced cities and towns, it draws from information in our grants management system. So it's very important that you update your address if that has changed in the recent vicinity. The timeline for this program, we are accepting applications now. The deadline is November 1st, 2022 at midnight. We will announce the results of the grant by the end of January or early February 2023. And as I mentioned earlier, there will be a simple final survey asking how you used the funds, and that will be due in the summer. Very briefly, I want to mention a few other opportunities for individuals at Mass Cultural Council. In past years, we have offered artist fellowships. That program is on pause for this grant cycle, fiscal year 2023. We are evaluating that program as part of our racial equity plan. We are offering STARS residencies this year. Those are grants to support creative learning residencies in the arts, sciences, and humanities. Of note, individuals can apply this year, which is a change from past years when only schools could apply. Also, we fund a series of local cultural councils throughout the Commonwealth, and those councils fund projects, cultural projects in their communities with the public benefit. So all of you who live in Massachusetts, there is not only the Mass Cultural Council to support you, but also a council in your local community, and we would encourage you to look into the grants. We have an online resource called ArtSake to support Massachusetts artists with opportunities and news and tips. We host a database of cultural employment opportunities called higherculture.org. And to be kept up to date on news for individuals and artists, please sign up for our Artist News e-newsletter, which you can do on our homepage, massculturalcouncil.org. At this point, I would love to know what questions are popping up in the Q&A. As you're looking into that, I just want to mention this image is a detail of Portrait 36 after Manet's Olympia, and it is by Dinora Justice.
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. I have a question regarding taxes. Two parts. One, is this taxable income? And how much of it would be taxed?
That is a great question. Yes, it is taxable income. I'm not precisely sure the percentage that would be taxed, but it would be considered taxable income. Though I would mention, you do have the ability, depending on how you are structured, whether you are structured as a business, if you are a sole proprietorship, you would have the ability to receive those funds to your business rather than to yourself as an individual. You could make that choice when we announce the grantees. You could make that choice to receive the funding either way, one of those two ways, and that might affect how those taxes are calculated. I'm afraid to say I don't know the exact percentage that you would be taxed, but it is taxable income.
Hi, Dan, it's Kelly again. If an artist it also has a business, a non-for-profit business, can they apply to both grants?
In this case, we would ask you to choose one or the other. If you are eligible to apply for the organization's funding, it might make sense because the grants start at $5,000 and might might be as large as $75,000, somewhere within that range. So if you are able to apply as an organization, that might be of benefit to your work, but we would ask that you choose one or the other.
Hi, Dan, this is Cheyenne. I am technically answering a lot of questions that are coming into the chat, but it's about the funding priorities and the geographic distribution and the lottery system. So people know the funding priorities and the geographic distribution are mechanisms that we are using to try to create a funding list without needing to use a lottery. If those two factors together create a tie between, say, 50 people who have all of the same points, and we only have 30 more grants to give out, then we can do a lottery between those 50 people to see which 30 are funded. So the lottery is our last ditch, make sure that the last funding that we go to, in the case of a tie, goes out without bias. But Dan, I would love you to talk about kind of the budget, and there's a lot of questions about how many grants will be given out.
Thank you, Cheyenne. This is Dan. That was an excellent explanation of the process. We expect to award $15 million to individuals in the cultural sector. That would come out to 3,000 grants of $5,000. So we are hoping, that's our hope, to award 3,000 grants of $5,000 to artists and other creative individuals in the cultural sector.
Thank you so much. And there is, and thank you, Kelly, for raising the question about taxes. There are questions now about what are best practices in putting aside some of this grant for taxes.
Thank you. This is Dan. Okay, I would ask folks possibly to get in touch with us separately about that. I don't necessarily have a strong idea of what the percentage would be taxed. So we'll have to follow up with you about that.
Dan, this is Kelly. In terms of the funding timeline, could you talk a little bit about the money distribution timeline, and if an artist were to receive the grant, when they would expect to get the money?
Sure. Thank you. This is Dan. Thank you, Kelly. So November 1st is the deadline, and we expect to announce the results by late January 2023 or early February 2023. From there, the process may be a little unique to some of our other years because this is just a unique year. But I would counsel grantees, if you were selected to be a grantee, I would counsel grantees to expect about 45 days to actually receive the funds from the time of announcement.
And this is Michael. If people are in doubt about their eligibility, we would prefer that they still apply or reach out to staff, because there are other funding opportunities, even if you aren't eligible for this, right? That was an answer to a question that I.
Yeah, Michael, thank you. That is, this is Dan again. Thank you, Michael. That's absolutely. We would strongly urge you to either apply or get in touch with us and start a dialogue. As Michael said, we appreciate all individuals working in the cultural sector and look forward to supporting you if it turns out not to be this program, then in some way in the future.
Dan, this is Kelly. Are local cultural council members eligible to apply?
Hi, Kelly, this is Dan. Thank you for that great question. The answer is yes. local cultural council volunteers and members are eligible to apply. I will mention there is one there is one complexity with our grants management system, which is local cultural council members will likely need to create a separate user profile, a separate user account to apply for this funding, because our system will recognize them when they log in as an LCC member as doing LCC work, not as a grant-seeking individual. So yes, LCC members are eligible to apply, and if they are eligible, I strongly would encourage them to. But again, they may need to make a new and separate user profile in our grants management system.
Dan, it's Kelly again. Are there income requirements for artists to apply?
Hi, Kelly, this is, oh, go ahead, sorry.
In other words, does an artist have to show recent tax returns? Do they have to show loss? Do they have to show profit? Could you talk a little bit about income requirement?
Sure, thank you, Kelly, this is Dan. Applicants do not need to attest to a certain amount of loss. They do not need to demonstrate income in the arts or losses, recent losses. In essence, this program assumes that individuals in the cultural sector are several steps behind where they should be, owing to the impact of the pandemic over the last 2.5 years. So it's a forward-facing program, and we hope those who apply and are funded are boosted and helped with a path forward. But there aren't questions relating to financial losses or finances in the application itself.
Hi, Dan, this is Maggie. Interesting question here. Somebody's writing in saying they received a Newton Cultural Council grant this year and wondered if that counted as having received Mass Cultural Council funding within the last 6 years.
Thank you, Maggie. This is Dan. Congratulations on the Newton Cultural Council funding. It would not count as direct funding. I'm glad Newton Cultural Council is supporting you. It would not count as direct funding, so it wouldn't block you from receiving that funding priority, assuming you didn't also receive Artist Fellowship, Traditional Arts Apprenticeship, or COVID-19 Relief Fund grants within the last 6 years.
Great.
Hi, Dan, this is Cheyenne. I just want to point people to the chat and the links that Carmen has been putting in the chat, especially the FAQs. That has a list of the under-resourced cities and towns that Dan was talking about, and has information on words like active and cultural worker, and it has a glossary of terms that we use throughout the programs. So I encourage people to look through the FAQs as well.
This is Dan. Thank you, Cheyenne, and thank you, Carmen, for adding those links. So if you have any questions about the program, we've included the email on this slide. Email your questions to individual.recovery@art.state.ma.us. In September, we will also offer several small group Q&A sessions via Zoom. And if the ones that are already offered fill up, we'll add more. So that might be a way to get questions answered. But I'm also curious if other staff members are seeing questions we should respond to live, or whether there are other issues that staff members notice we've not covered yet.
Hi, Dan, this is this is Kelly, and there's been some questions regarding the underfunded category with regard to women, seniors over 65, or artists who identify as LGBTQ+. Could we talk about the underfunded category?
Thank you, Kelly. This is Dan. Yeah, that's a great question. Similar to what I said about full-time students, we have to make hard decisions about where to prioritize funding, and it's not a message. We're not attempting to send a message of not valuing work by the sector at large. We know that communities of color and under-resourced communities were disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so that is why we made that decision. But again, it's not to be at the expense of other groups who we also support. I want to mention, if applicants do not meet our funding priorities or don't meet all of the funding priorities, that doesn't mean don't apply. It may be that you could still receive funding. On the other hand, I would say to those who do meet the funding priorities, that's also not a sure thing that you would receive a grant. Some of this depends on the volume of grants we receive, but if you are eligible for this funding, we would strongly encourage you to apply and reach out to us with questions if you have any.
Dan, this is Kelly. In the actual application form, could you talk about what an artist would submit, what the requirements would be?
Yeah, this is Dan. Thank you. That's a fantastic question. As I said earlier, we worked really hard to make it as simple as possible. So one of we want to determine eligibility, and to do that, we ask for a demonstration of your work in arts and culture. So the way we are asking for that demonstration is to either include a website. That could be a personal website. That could be a site that is not a personal site, but has samples of your work, let's say a YouTube page or Instagram, or even I know some performers have Facebook pages that they use as kind of their personal web pages. So we ask that you either include a web page that would include samples or demonstrations of your work, or you could choose to upload a resume or CV that would include samples of your work, or demonstrations of your work in arts and culture. To be completely honest, other than several questions about your work in the arts and whether you identify as an artist or as a teaching artist, scientist, humanist, or as a cultural worker, and in what broad discipline you work, there's not a whole lot more to it. We tried to make it a very simple process, and I think applicants may be surprised when they get to the end, but they're already there.
Hi, Dan, it's Cheyenne. The question is, are funds expected to be used in full between January and June?
Thank you, Cheyenne. This is Dan. That's not a requirement. It's not a requirement that funds be used in full between now and June. What would be a requirement is the reporting, the survey that we will ask in June, but the actual spending of the funds is not necessarily a requirement.
Dan, there was a question about a sample application. Will that be available?
That's it. Thank you, Cheyenne. That is a great note. Yes, we will. We'll work on that. We are, as yet, we did not have a sample application provided, but thank you. We will work on adding one to the cultural sector recovery grants guideline page.
Dan, this is Kelly. If artists received COVID relief grants or EDIL loans during the pandemic, are they still eligible to apply?
Thanks, Kelly. This is Dan. Yes. Even if you've received past grants or loans, you are eligible to apply. As I mentioned earlier, there is a funding priority for new grantees. So if you received funding from Mass Cultural Council, direct funding, then that would include the COVID-19 relief fund. You would not get those priority points. Again, that's only if you receive Mass Cultural Council funding. You would still, though, be eligible to apply. So yes, grants either from Mass Cultural Council or from other agencies and loans as well would not interfere with your eligibility to apply.
Dan, this is Kelly. If you have a stage name or a name that you do business as, should you apply with that or should you apply with your legal name?
Hi, this is Dan. Thank you. That is a great question. I believe there are ways to. Thank you. I believe you would probably be best served to use a legal name, but in truth, either would work. This actually may come up more as an issue when if that applicant were announced as a grantee or selected as a grantee, and then it would be a matter of legalities in the contract. So I would say either one is fine. A stage name would be fine, but there might be a point if the applicant is selected as a grantee later in the process where just for legal requirements, we would need a legal name for the contract.
Dan, Kelly again. If an artist, there's a question regarding applicants with a disability, with the funding priorities. Does the application require artists with disabilities to disclose their specific disability, or just the fact that they meet disability criteria in order to meet the funding priority?
Hi, Kelly, this is Dan. That's a terrific question. The application does not ask for a specific explanation of the disability. It asks for, as you said, an attestation of identifying as having a disability.
We will never ask that, just so it's illegal and we don't want to.
Thank you, Shai.
And this is Michael. There's still some question about when the money has to be spent.
Yeah.
Just to clarify to everyone, these are unrestricted grant dollars. You can use them for what you need for your living expenses. You can use it for a project. You do not have to use it for project money. So I'm assuming you all have expenses between now and the end of the fiscal year. But there's no restriction on when the money has to be spent.
Thank you, Michael. That's a terrific observation.
And on that same note, this is Cheyenne. The survey at the end will probably ask how funds were spent, but not to the detail of receipts and things like that. So Dan, if you know anything else about the final survey that can give people an idea of the record keeping, they should do, that would be great.
Thank you, Cheyenne. Agreed. It's unlike, we would not be asking for uploaded receipts. That information, we will ask for it because it will help us to understand the impact of the funding, and it will help us as we advocate for future support for individuals in the cultural sector. It will help us to have that data to know where those needs were, where the impact was of any funding, and it will help us to better advocate for individuals in the cultural sector in the future. But as with the application process, I guess I just want to say we will work with grantees. Please do not be concerned about it. We will work with you to make it as simple as possible. We welcome getting the chance to work with you.
Hi, Dan, this is Maggie. We have a question here asking if the historically underfunded category question, that is BIPOC disability, in the application, is it in the application or is it in the user profile?
Hi, Maggie, this is Dan. Thank you. That is a great question.
Yeah.
So we do, it's in the application is the short answer.
Okay.
We do have some demographic information that we ask for when you create your user profile in our grants management system. We ask for it. First of all of it is, none of it is required. You're required to give an answer, but skip question is one of the options. But we ask for it similar to what I said about the final survey so that we can understand our constituency, we can understand any impact of our support and our funding. But to answer that question more succinctly, there are questions that applicants will answer about the historically underfunded funding priority in the application itself.
Hi, Dan, this is Cheyenne. There is a specific question about the resume versus website. The specific question, is it better to submit a resume or a website? Is there one that would make my application stronger, or can I submit both? And there are also questions like, if I do work as a teaching artist, but consider myself an artist, which one should I be applying for? And so generally, can you talk about what elements are ranked kind of and which aren't, maybe?
Great. Okay. Thank you, Cheyenne. This is Dan. As to the first question, there's no benefit to doing a resume over a website. But you could, I mean, if your website's in your resume, great. Then we both are handled. You could upload your resume and then it's the website. If it's in the resume, then both are there. I would counsel the applicant who is both a teaching artist and a working artist to, first I'd say neither one would be prioritized. That's just an eligibility question. And if the applicant is both, then the applicant is eligible. And so that there would not be a benefit to choosing one over the other. As to how to pick, I might just suggest a kind of gut check and a question of, how does that individual see their work? Primarily, how would they primarily see themselves as primarily a teaching artist or primarily an artist? Either one will be fine as far as our application process goes. So it would not be benefited or harmed by picking one over the other.
Thank you, Dan. This is Cheyenne again. There is a question of whether or not people will get notified the reason they don't get a grant, if that is the case.
Thank you, Cheyenne. This is Dan. That's a great question. I mean, for many of the, so depending on how many applications we receive, if we receive more applications than we have grants to give, there will not be an evaluative reason why So I'm just going to throw out some numbers. These are not necessarily real numbers. I'm just coming up with them for the purposes of answering this question. Let's say we receive 5,000 applications and have 3,000 grants to give. There would not be an evaluative reason why 2,000 of those applicants did not receive grants. So there won't be a kind of notes process where we provide notes on applications because it's just not that kind of application process, and there wouldn't be a response or reasoning really to provide. So I hope that answered the question. If the applicant is not eligible to apply, I believe that applicant would receive a different response that has to do with eligibility. But there won't be notes about applications that don't reach, there won't be notes for applicants who do not receive grants just because it's not that type of process.
Hi, Dan, this is Charles. I have a question I thought was really interesting, which is, can applicants submit a video of the application instead of the writing?
That is a great question. This is Dan. So I would encourage that person to get in touch with me. Yes, we want to work with people to apply. There is not a lot to, I don't know if that applicant has logged in and taken a look at the application. There's not, I'm not positive there would be a great benefit to doing it that way by video. But like I said, we want to work with people and welcome individuals and artists to apply, and we'll work with people to apply. So I would encourage that applicant to get in touch with me. And I would say separately that the idea of using video or other formats rather than just writing is something that we are looking into as we explore and evaluate all of our grant processes.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dan.
And Dan, this is Cheyenne. I just want to add to that that Charles Baldwin and I are working on several different kinds of access needs. So applicants who are looking for an alternative way to do their application or get any of this information are welcome to reach out to Dan or Charles or myself. That includes getting the application in a different language, having a large print form of the application, doing things verbally, as was the question. So we have many different services available to make sure that you can apply in the way that it is most comfortable and advantageous for you.
Thank you, Cheyenne. I just want to be cognizant of people's time. We're already several minutes over 12. Maybe is there possibly one more question that has popped up in the Q&A a number of times that we could answer before we conclude?
Yes, this is Cheyenne. People, I think, would love to hear more about geographic distribution and how that actually works.
Okay, this is Dan. Thank you so much, Cheyenne, and thank you to everybody who attended this information session. If we didn't answer your question, we apologize and hope you will follow up with us by email or by phone. And as I said, we will post this a video of this information session on our YouTube channel. As far as geographic distribution, I'll just give you a sample. This is, again, these are just numbers that I'm making up for the purpose of answering the question, but let's say we received 1,000 grants or 1,000 applications from Western Massachusetts, and we had 10,000 applications overall. 1,000 would be what, 10% of 10,000, and so we would award 10% of our grants to the Western Massachusetts region. So basically, we would just, our plan is to distribute the grants in proportion to the number of applications we received from each of those regions to make sure that we reach every single part of the Commonwealth. I want to thank, thank Partners Interpreting and Lisa and Tara, who helped us with American Sign Language interpretation. And thank you, Jill P, for providing the live captioning. Again, we so appreciate the work that all of you do in the cultural sector, and we look forward to supporting you if you do decide to apply for this grant and in your future work. And we thank you.